Whoops, I was muted. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Kathy Yao, and I am on the board of the Boston Korean Adoptees. On behalf of BKA, we are thrilled to be hosting and to be a part of tonight's, our inaugural open mic story slam event, the first of many we hope to come. Thank you so much to our storytellers here tonight. I think storytelling, any artistic endeavor can certainly be a tool for healing, for individual communal healing. And so thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for letting us all be a part of it. Thank you so much to Shanae Sullivan for Shanae Randall for all of your help tonight. And thank you all for joining us. One quick point of business before I hand it over. This event is made possible by funding from the National Center for the Rights of the Child. And the NCRC is collecting responses for a survey about how this program went. So at the end of the event, if you could please share your thoughts with them through the survey that I'll post in the chat. I'm going to announce it again at the end of the program, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we'd really appreciate it if you could complete their survey. So congratulations again to our storytellers, and I will pass over to Shanae.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shanae Randall. I've been running this open mic workshop for the last 3 weeks with our phenomenal storytellers, and I'm very, very excited to have them present all of their stories to you tonight, and I hope that you enjoy them. I hope that you connect with them. Before we get started, I want to give a special thank you to Boston Korean Adoptees, especially Sarah O'Neill, the president, Kathy, who's with us tonight, Tan Ferraro, who is their board and research coordinator, who has also been very, very helpful, and our interpreter tonight, Bob Laparo, as well as the NCRC for the funding for this workshop. I shared this quote in week 2 of our workshop with our storytellers, and it says, "The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic," by John F. Kennedy. And I shared this to introduce the idea of truth around adoption, because many of us feel as though our voices haven't necessarily had the spotlight that they deserved, especially in a month like November being NAM. And I told them when they were digging for stories and mining for stories to think not necessarily about undoing the lie, but also combating any myths or any misconceptions about not only adoption, but any of the identities that they held and anything that they experienced in their lives. So the stories that you're going to hear tonight aren't necessarily all about adoption, but they're all inherently about adoptees because they're from their hearts and their experiences and their voices. So I'm very, very excited for you to hear just the incredible breadth of experience and feelings and emotions from each of our storytellers tonight. The order of the storytellers is as follows. In between each storyteller, we will be projecting their bio on the screen for you to read. So we'll leave that up for about 2 minutes in between each storyteller. We'll also have a brief 5-minute intermission in between Kim and Kendall. So about halfway through, we'll have a little bit of a break. And with that, I will present our first storyteller bio. And this is Anna's bio.
Hi, my name is Anna, and my pronouns are she and her. And the title of my story is called In the Company of Ghosts. At least once a week, I drive by a large sign on a street just blocks from my house, speckled with residential houses, gas stations, grocery stores, and churches. The sign says free class Korean in a bold black font with a phone number and colors of the Korean flag swirling around in the O of the word Korean. The sign is simple and to a degree unnoticeable if it's not relevant to you. It's posted on the front lawn of a church. I'm not sure how long the sign has been there, but it came into my family's consciousness about 6 months ago. The first time I learned about the sign was because my 6-year-old kid told me about it. He noticed it on the way to his t-ball practice with my partner. He said, "Anna, Anna," calls me by my first name, which is a separate, always evolving conversation, but it was my choice and my request to him. He said, "I saw a sign where we can learn Korean together. I saw a sign where we can learn Korean together for free. Should we do it?" This moment, lasting only a few seconds, had me feeling anxious because I'd casually tried language lessons about 12 years ago, but didn't stick with them. Shame because I didn't already speak Korean, and joy because this small human I'm parenting was proud and excited about learning a language that connected him to part of his culture. A vision flashed before me, sitting in a dimly lit church basement with a group of 6-year-olds and a volunteer member of the congregation. Me in my 40s, queer, dressed in flannel, not religious, sitting in tiny chairs facing a chalkboard, trying to count together in Korean. The kids joyfully counting in sequence, and me urgently trying to flip back in my notes so I could get the pronunciation right. A familiar sense of feeling utterly behind somehow. I was panicking and nothing had even happened. But all I remember saying was, "Cool, we should learn more." Trying to strike a balance to validate a desire while also self-aware enough to recognize my internal terror at the thought of trying, failing, or maybe even enjoying the experience of learning Korean. I've always been jealous, angry, annoyed at the ease at which other people, white folks in particular, have towards the act of learning languages. Because it's fun, it's their passion and hobby. They love culture and they just want to try something new. What is there to lose? But for me, the thought of trying to learn Korean felt laborious, high stakes, and extremely vulnerable. When I was 6 years old, I remember the feeling of hating that I wasn't white. I have vivid memories of being asked where I was really from, kids mocking the shape of my eyes, and questions about my real parents, and peers spewing off racist chants of what they thought an Asian language sounded like. Nothing unfamiliar to other Asian Americans and Asian adoptees. And now here I was, almost 40 years later, with my own kid, who was filled with curiosity and pure delight at the thought of learning Korean together. And it actually felt really special. I have a dear friend in my life, also a Korean adoptee, who lives in the same city as me. I told them about this sign moment with my kid. I told them where it was, and as it turns out, they drive by it fairly regularly too. We've separately expressed an interest in learning Korean, not necessarily at this church, but somewhere. We joke about the sign, usually via text, just brief one-liners or phrases. Past the Korean language sign, saw the sign, and my recent favorite, another day, another drive-by of the Korean language class. This lighthearted back and forth is relieving. It's a concise, amusing way to acknowledge heavier, messier realities For me, the trauma of family separation, the grief of cultural loss, what it is to stumble through cultural reclamation, and the weight that racism has in my life. The sign, it's haunting us. My friend named it one of our Korean ghosts. I love this. It captures exactly how I feel towards this object. I think about all my other Korean ghosts, the reminders that my life began in a really different place and time, the things about being adopted, displaced, that I keep at a surface level because I don't know what I will uncover, or worse yet, that I won't uncover anything if I go any layers deeper. The things persistently haunting me are the experiences I never got to have, the connections I never made to family and home, insecurities that feel like a direct result of adoption trauma, and so much of the unknown that lingers in my life. There's my birthday. It's coming up. My documents say November 10th, and I really feel like a Scorpio. But this is just information that got entered into a system and printed off with a stamp signature. However, these ordinary documents mean so much to me because there's some tangible proof that I exist, even if they might be incorrect. And even if I know that my life is so much more than documents. But my birthday, my ghost, for most years of my life, I've coasted through, enjoying my birthday, or at least not hating it, going through the motions of planning, celebrating, and gathering. To an extent, I haven't removed these rituals, and in the weirdest way, mostly because it feels awkward, or because I'm used to them, which don't even seem like good reasons. The last few years, though, I've been re-examining my birthday. Most of that has just been privately, but I've gotten braver and started talking about it more with people I trust, expressing my discomfort, the ambiguity of what to do, and just taking time to explain why birthdays actually feel excruciatingly painful. I have no person in my life to call, to chat with, who can recall a memory of my arrival, my beginning in this world, to explain what the weather was like that day, what food they ate, if they were alone or had companionship. These simple details that I take for granted with the birth of my own child. That we have a privilege of co-creating a story, that I can pass on a memory, that he will remember me sharing this memory of his journey into the world. That there's proof that he exists beyond a document. What was that day of my birth to the person who birthed me? Painful, relieving, devastating, forgotten, unforgettable, a buried secret. Most accurately, perhaps it was complicated. So this year, as the time approaches, I've been thinking about my birthday options, a choose your own adventure, if you will. Option 1, tell everyone in my life to completely avoid my birthday. Don't tell me happy birthday. Don't acknowledge that I'm special. You're glad to know me. Don't provide any sort of recognition of me being here at all. Just ignore me, ignore it. My birthday is an awful reminder of too many depressing things. Option 2, tell everyone in my life to celebrate me. Let's throw an incredible party every year. Shower me with gifts, compliments, praise. Tell me everything you love about me. You're so glad I'm here. You love my clothes, my hair. I'm amazing. You've had a crush on me for years, and there couldn't possibly be anyone as brilliant and funny as me. You're blessed to be in my presence in this lifetime. Option 3, let everyone in my life do whatever they're already doing. Going to work, reading at home, playing with their kids, eating lunch, being sad about their own stuff. And for me, I will privately grieve. I'll try and figure out self-care, read poetry, eat good food, buy myself candles and plants, accept gifts if they happen to appear, be sad with a friend, acknowledge the day for what it is or what it represents, but don't feel like there's any expectation of what I have to do or how I have to feel. Last year, I went with something close to option 3, and it felt authentic, maybe the most it ever has felt in my life so far. It wasn't perfect, but it did feel like I honored the heaviness I felt inside, with small moments of restoration and joy. My Korean language sign, my birthday, these are just a couple of the ghosts accompanying me in this lifetime. But there are endless others that connect me to another world, or maybe even a future possibility. A birth family search, traveling to Korea, cultural celebrations and rituals, my Korean name, the list goes on. While I can reliably say that I will always feel a degree of restlessness with my ghosts, which feel appropriate, I hope that my relations with them can become less fraught over time. Perhaps they already are. And rather than hesitate or move away, I hope to more often than not move towards them bravely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your story. Our next storyteller for the evening is Wu A Yi.
Hi, I'm Wu Yi. I go by she, he, and e pronouns. The title is Minimalism with ADHD During the Pandemic. I'm going to start off with an introduction. To the uninitiated, most people think of ADHD as hyperactive boys, but ever since the pandemic, a lot of people socialized to be women have come forward as ADHD. But their hyperactivity is more internal, like overthinking and overdoing. Psychologists are realizing that sexism around ADHD has real consequences for adult women who get overlooked. But I also realize that there's a racial component. The same model minority myth that prevents my Asian peers from collecting welfare also prevents Asians from being appropriately diagnosed. My spouse and I share a 1-bedroom apartment with a couple of fruit flies. They get up in my face when I'm trying to eat or Zoom. It used to annoy me, but now I realize that I'm like those flies, with my brain fluttering every which way. When you heard this title, I bet you thought, yes, I would like to know how to be a minimalist with ADHD, but that's not what this is about. This is not a how-to. Heck, I don't even know how to manage ADHD yet. No, this is about being minimized. Why is it that the people closest to me who claim to love me often make my pain small? I remember when my teacher mom told me I don't have ADHD when I moved to Colorado. How would she know? There's no one in her family or my dad's family who has it. Now they know that they don't know me like they thought they did, which I've tried to explain repeatedly throughout my life. And recently, my godmother, whose son has hyperactivity ADHD or classic ADHD, did a knee-jerk intervention with me after I got an official assessment that unequivocally stated my symptoms could not be attributed to anything else, but just because it was online. This is in 2022, when most locals don't even want to meet in person. Recently, I reached clarity regarding my ADHD assessment. I put together a list of about 89 symptoms that I've had reaching back from childhood to adulthood. So this assessment validated my suspicions, but the reaction was invalidating. At this point, there's no question. However, I keep getting the, but you graduated from college argument. It was hard enough being understood and taken seriously previously without knowing I had ADHD. Sorry, I need some water. Can you give me some water? Sorry about that. Oh. It was hard enough being understood and taken seriously previously without knowing I had ADHD, and it's still hard being understood and taken seriously with the knowledge I have now. ADHD makes me feel misunderstood, but now I understand why I experienced that. She said that since I've lived my whole life without a diagnosis, that I'll be fine, not considering that people tend to seek a diagnosis when things are outside of manageability. Even though the assessment is standardized, my godmother wanted me to apologize for feeling hurt that this intervention took place. And another family member tore up my diagnosis, then didn't want to talk about the fact that I was told to promise to use money we didn't have to get another diagnosis I don't need, all the while being scarred by an ill-placed intervention. Where was this intervention when I had a real addiction? In fact, when did my family ever care when I had a solid year's worth of depression? People say we're in a new normal. Yes, it's a new normal for me, because my normal was being yelled at every day and trauma bonding. Some say it's not normal to speak in psychobabble. I've been told that boundaries is a term that young people use, or gaslighting is a political term. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that we have narcissists in official positions. ADHD, many believe, has its roots in childhood trauma or childhood PTSD. I'm used to being made small by loved ones, friends, and coworkers. My father yelled at me variations of stupid daily. I've had coworkers take advantage of the fact that as a person with ADHD, I was more sensitive to criticism. And I've had friends who made it a game to call me dumber than a kumquat. People tell me don't be down on myself, but let's be clear. I'm not down on myself until someone is beating me down, no matter how subtle to enabling bystanders. In the time after we learned that Facebook weighted the angry emoji in their algorithms, when the average American is so angry about the state of our country to the extent that it warranted its own SNL cold open, what gets to me is when weak, conflict avoidant, traumaless, neurotypical androids who don't seem to be living in this year, 2022, tell me I'm not good enough as a human if I don't bottle up my emotions like my spouse, who would rather go through 15 years of major depression than express his feelings pre-marriage. My father instilled in me daddy issues. Having grown up with bona fide daddy issues, sex was the only way I could get approval from any man, and it was the easiest way to get approval. It was also the way my impulsivity expressed itself. Men may have thought they manipulated me by using sweet words to get into my pants, but it was I who used sex to get their friendship. This was how I ended up with my ex. Today is near the birthday of my ex. My ex thought I had no trouble maintaining his jobless lifestyle the first time I was on my own. When he told me he applied to jobs, my friend whose house we were living in caught him watching porn, but most of the time he was gaming. We ended up living in 10 places in 7 months due to his record. It was traumatizing for me, especially since people with ADHD tend not to be good with money management, but it was not traumatizing for him until I left. It takes people an average of 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. We survived, and the last, not the only, time I left was the same year I met my spouse. My spouse thinks I'll have no trouble finding a job. It's been 2 months. He hasn't done the calculations for what it takes to keep both of us alive and housed because I'm fully self-funded, even if I have to sell my car. Intellectually, he knows I have a past, but sometimes I feel like I'm treated as if I have no reason to be anxious. I thought anxiety disorders only applied when normal people wouldn't also be concerned. Perhaps it's just me though. After being diagnosed, I'm having a hard time understanding what a normal amount of emotion actually is, or what normal anything is, because I know the people who raised me are not normal. He tells me I just need to be self-aware 24/7 when I know he's not and no one else is either. When I have enough money coming in, the first thing I'm getting is medication. Surely it'll solve all my problems with focus and rejection sensitive dysphoria, or something that makes me feel abused more acutely. However, it is rough knowing that I can't purchase medication for something I have. I can't handle much besides rent. When I told my ADHD friends that I have ADHD, they appropriately told me, "Congratulations," emphasizing the gifts of both knowing and having. When I told my spouse, I was told, "I'm sorry," the same way people say that when they hear I'm adopted. I just got back from seeing my friends who don't have ADHD. I met many of my friends from self-development groups. I'm supposed to be positive, my friends say. They post that none of us should need validation. What I realized was that some self-development training is so steeped in meaningless platitudes and sometimes toxic positive thinking, which is not very different from positive verbal abuse. For those who don't know, positive verbal abuse makes you feel like you must live up to someone else's idea of you, not who you are. The model minority myth is basically a variation of positive verbal abuse. What I realized about myself is that for too long, I have let others do the thinking for me. In the same moment that a motivational speaker is telling me to take back my power, I was giving all my power to them. I wasn't just giving it to them, but to their persona, their infallible persona, not the fallible human that they really are with emotions and feelings. Positive thinking gurus tell us to get rid of the negative people in our lives. I go a step further and say to get rid of the unempathetic. If someone is in your support network and is not doing their job, then fire them. If it's an off day for them too, maybe we're not doing our job. Speaking of jobs, in my last job, I dealt daily with a coworker who was critical without kindness. Like a stepsister from Cinderella, she took everything I'd been working on up until then and ripped it up so I couldn't attend the ball. I had all the symptoms of unbelonging syndrome. I felt anxiety every time I met with the boss because I felt that he no longer thought I was good enough. I felt that people were talking about me behind my back. I didn't feel safe to be my authentic self or to use my lived experiences to inform my work. Now, getting back to those flies, we finally got some fly paper and 2 devices to contain them. We rounded up what looks like 100 flies, but some still escaped. I feel that as much as I try to control my ADHD, I still have some traits that cannot be contained. All these things I've noted above might seem disconnected, like an ADHD rambling, but they are all indicators of my ADHD symptoms. I have a sense that people who say they love me can't possibly comprehend the ADHD world in which I live. How can they love me if they have no conception of how I see myself or how I feel within myself? I felt a lot of things with ADHD: rejection, low self-esteem, misunderstood, but also creative and determined. However, I suspect that if others understood it, I would have felt more of the positives throughout my life and less of the negatives. Everyone seems to make me feel small at some point. It's a way of life. It's how I've lived with ADHD. No one cares about my feelings except for me. Why should I care? What I've learned from my ADHD being minimized by parents and at work, my trauma being minimized by my ex, my anxiety being minimized at home, and my emotions being minimized by friends, is that love is not enough. In fact, sometimes love makes things worse. Love still makes mistakes. Love still minimizes, even unintentionally, and sometimes out of habit, out of a belief that that's what love is. But love doesn't pay the bills, diagnose, or teach me how to manage my symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Our next storyteller is going to be Kim, and after Kim's story, we're going to have a brief intermission.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Kaminsky. My pronouns are she, her, and my title is Truth, Identity in a Multiverse. What is your favorite season? Summer. During the summer of 2018, I endeavored on an empowering trip from West to East Coast across the US. I had my two young boys with me. They were cute as buttons. They were comfy and happily trotting alongside me, showered and dressed. Me too. My hair looked great. Around the house we went together, packing. Into the Audi we went together, down the I-5 freeway, and arriving at the San Diego International Airport. First stop, Detroit, Michigan. A familiar flight from times when I was still breastfeeding. I remember that first time trying to breastfeed on the plane, in the seat next to the window, with the big burly man sitting next to me in the center seat. I was nervous, but he had been so nice to pick up the binky when it fell onto the floor. There are nice people everywhere. In Michigan, we made the rounds to see Babsha and Grandpa and Great Babsha and Aunt Christy. Art met us in Michigan in between a work break and then flew out again. At the end of that segment of our trip, the boys and I picked up our rental car and drove east together, taking the I-90 into Erie, Pennsylvania. There, my parents, Juju and Pa Carl, eagerly welcomed us into their house. I took the boys out to Waldameer and to the beach and the water park. I made cherry pie after I took the boys to check out the cherry festival. I even made a pretty design on top. I decided this was the year to make peace with my cousin who had abused me during a visit when I was back in high school. The piece was for myself. My parents had the usual banter and humor of an East Coast past generation of the Honeymooners and Benny Hill and Lawrence Welk and John Wayne. The household had not evolved over the years from the Leave It to Beaver formula that I grew up with. Although I had spent my entire childhood waiting to escape the formula's gravity, it was something comforting now. Like going into a Target or McDonald's anywhere in the world. That must be what having children and being middle class does to you. Or maybe it was the hormones still ringing in my body to bond me to my offspring. At the end of that segment of the trip, the boys and I hopped on another plane together and headed to Boston, Massachusetts, the place of Artie's conception and where Art and my first year of marriage unfolded as we both reached for the stars and still for one another. My heart friends were there in Boston, and it seemed only fitting to complete this huge cross-country family tour with a visit to friends that made this only child feel like this is what siblings would be like on the best of days. That summer was the absolute best I can ever remember feeling in life. Many things had come around full circle. There were many good humans that I was connected to and that received both me and my children with love and open arms. By December 2018, I had one foot in one reality and another in a different version. My sense of balance was off, and I fell through a large rabbit hole. I no longer trusted the people closest to me. New lenses appeared through which I gazed at the life I had built. Shame and guilt and desperation filled my body. Sickness that was always there finally made sense. The clock struck midnight, and the fairy tale of my life vanished into thin air. Tuesday, June 15th, 2021 at 5:51 p.m. I read a bit more of Adopted Territory today, so I see now how my struggles fit into a conversation. Who will they marry? And so many of us Korean adoptees married white men or white women. Is that considered successful assimilation? Is it successful multiculturalism? Is it fucked up? A little, yeah. My marriage to a white man, a Polish American, blonde haired, blue eyed, all American boy, had been bestowed upon me from the unexplainable working of some invisible forces in the universe. It had miraculously resolved my struggles. It resolved family. It felt like a continuity was set in place when I married Art. He fit in with my family better than I did. It resolved my identity. My kids looked like I felt, a mix of Korean and Polish and European heritage. It was perfect. Now it has all come crashing down. Who am I? What did I resolve? Did I further erase myself? Did I erase my Koreanness to further fit into my white family? Did I have children that look more like they fit into my white family? Would it make sense to give my white parents Asian grandchildren? Does it make sense that my white parents have an Asian child? Where am I in this story? Did I settle into a lifestyle of white middle class suburbanness? If we didn't live in an area that is 35% Asian, would my kids have the same upbringing as I did? Would they have all white friends? Would they marry white women? I don't know. My close friends were white. Before the CADs, my close friends were all white. I wasn't friends with Asian people. I didn't know about their cultures or their struggles. I don't know what it means to be an Asian American. My story of being an Asian American is quite different. All these questions, deep questions that have structured my life and my loved ones, how could I not halt everything? How could I keep going on this ride? How could I not get off and examine what I see now? What does this mean? What does this mean to me? What does this mean to my life? What does this mean for my children? What is the definition of family across the globe? Why do some families get to keep their kids and others don't? What definition of family are we upholding? What was my identity within the family that I created? Why did I need to deconstruct that identity and the family that surrounded it? What do I wish my identity to be now? I wish to be seen. I wish to see myself first. I realize that I have never seen myself. I've seen myself through the eyes of others, others that gave me away, others that fostered me, others that adopted me, others that loved and befriended me, others that saw me as adopted while I fluctuated between seeing myself as adopted and seeing myself as my parents' daughter. Somehow, those two contradictory statements assimilated into some amalgamation of structure that my life grew within. The dissonance within the structure manifests as identity struggle. Do you know who you are? What if you didn't? Is it debilitating? It can be. This is the journey I travel to find peace in my soul and unearth my capacity to breathe freely and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. We're going to take a short 5-minute intermission and we will come back at 8:25, no, 8:26 Eastern time. Okay, we are back from our intermission, and Kendall is going to be our next storyteller.
Hello, my name is Kendall Hinman. My pronouns are she and her. My narrative title is Read the Room. Has there ever been a time in your life where you wish you said exactly what you wanted to when you wanted to say it? This perfect moment happened to me a few years ago when my boyfriend at the time were invited to a couple's dinner party. There were 3 sets of couples, including us. We were the only interracial minority couple in the room, which is par for the course for us in most environments. We had just befriended the 2 other couples. We're excited to spend some time with each of them. One couple was a special education teacher and a warehouse worker at the local airbase. The other couple was a programs director at a local college and a warehouse worker at the airbase as well. The evening was going well, spirits were high, and fondue was bubbling, conversation was flowing, and everyone was at ease. After dinner, the group of us were all playing a party game. It connected to a TV, and anyone can play with a cell phone. Each participant submits an anonymous answer. The prompt for us all was, what could the acronym BNJ stand for? In big bold letters displayed on a 55-inch TV. I'm scrolling with my eyes each player's submission. Our answers are in big, bold black lettering with contrasting colors behind blue, white, yellow, orange, red, purple, and teal. My eyes land on Black N-word Jesus as an option. Immediately, my blood starts to boil. I feel the blood rushing to my face and then pure panic. I freeze in that moment. What do? Do I say anything? Is anyone else going to say anything? Is this directed at my boyfriend? Is he going to say anything? I am internally screaming. In some inexplicable moment of bravery, I find some fiery gumption and say, who wrote that? That's not acceptable. No one would say anything. The silence was deafening. Not even my boyfriend said anything. The audacity of the situation was real for me, but to no one else. Is no one else seeing these words displayed on the screen? Is this situation where it can just be misinterpreted or misunderstood, like the countless other conversations I've experienced, where most microaggressions are swept under the rug? Where are you from? How do you not have an accent? Your English is so good. How much did you cost? Will she speak Korean or English? But in this moment, I read the room and stood my ground. I was horrified that a friend would be so casual to use such a derogatory term so candidly in such a relaxed setting. I felt silenced by the dinner party of people, but felt strongly in that I was right to stand up to all of them. I scanned the group and assumed the owner of the submission was one of the warehouse guys from the airbase. I stared them down as if I could shoot darts out of my eyes, but neither of them flinched while I held their gaze. How could I keep playing this casual game with those words staring back at me? It's like the FedEx logo. Once you see that arrow, you can't unsee it. I couldn't look away from those words displayed on the TV screen. Was I making a big deal of this? Was I in the wrong? I stood my ground and pressed some more. Who wrote that? After a few palpable beats of tension-filled air, my assumption was wrong. Programs director at a college campus, unassuming Ashley, confesses to being the owner of Black N-word Jesus. I am caught off guard and momentarily stunned. She immediately begins to cry her white tears of privilege, of embarrassment, emphatically apologizing and trying to make amends. Even through her weaponized tears, she couldn't understand the impact of her use of oppressive language, how her own whiteness, power, and privilege were being put in place by a Korean American adoptee woman. She just wanted to save face to a room of people and move on with the night. As if myself and boyfriend had not been made to feel unwelcome and discriminated against. I didn't let her off that easily. I pressed some more and asked her, in what world do you think that's okay to use that language? She had no logical explanation for herself. Oh, I wasn't thinking. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a word. I've been drinking. Nothing but vague platitudes and hollow excuses. I heard her half-hearted apology, but I expressed my severe disappointment and disdain for her choice of words as a person, as an educator in higher education, and as a friend. Later, my boyfriend thanked me for sticking up for him, as he had never experienced a direct derogatory racial remark before. In this moment, I found my voice due to my lived experience as a transracial Korean adoptee woman. I'm in a culmination of growing up in Connecticut with my loving but wonder-bred white parents, dealing with bullying due to my Korean phenotype in a predominantly upper middle class Caucasian Connecticut suburb, by going to a postgraduate year at a private school and not being Korean enough for the native Korean international students because I didn't speak fluent Korean, going to UConn and not knowing what a hanbok was during pledging to an Asian sorority, and going to Simmons for my master's degree and learning that there were terms and language for the feelings of discrimination, prejudice, and oppression I was experiencing and feeling, but could never put my finger on. I have grown and learned that the voices of the minority will always know how the voices of the majority utilize their power and privilege to suppress and control others. There are times when this emotional labor of having to be the teachable moment or after school special for others to be aware of their own privilege, to be empathetic, to be a decent human being, becomes weary and burdensome for those not in power. But with this growth, I am no longer dating that boyfriend. I am no longer associated with that friend. I believe that words matter and language matters. I've been quiet enough, and now I don't give a damn. I'm going to use my voice. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kendall.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Gross, and I use the pronouns she, her, and my story is called The Food Truck. A sorority girl from Southern Georgia knows more about Korean food than me. This is the unexpected truth that I'm discovering while waiting in line for a food truck in Denver. Japchae? Oh yeah, I love japchae. What the fuck is that? I pull my phone out of my pocket and pretend to check emails as I quickly pull up Google. How do you even spell japchae? I Google it before I get to the food truck window. My coworker is going on and on about how she loves Korean food and is listing many things I've never heard of. I nod and try to play cool. Will the food truck guy know I'm a fraud? Can he tell that I'm not a real Korean and have no idea what I'm trying to order? The panic is creeping in. I'll have the number 4, heat level 8. That sounds believable, right? I don't fucking know. This total identity crisis is happening on a sidewalk in downtown Denver, and I just thought I was going to lunch with a friend. Now I'm facing the harsh reality that I know nothing about Korean food, let alone if I even like it. She's asking more questions. Now she's asking if I like mandu. Quick Google, looks like a dumpling of some sort. Okay, cool, this is fine. I got this, just go with it. Oh, mandu? Yeah, I love those. Can she tell I'm making this up? Her innocent questions and small talk are killing me. This is not how I imagined my cultural reckoning happening, but here we are. My first bite, it's delicious, sweet relief. It's like nothing I've ever had before, all packed into one bowl. Something familiar about it, but something totally new. I couldn't wait to come back and order it again. And I ate there every time the food truck parked downtown. This 10-minute sidewalk epiphany kind of sums up how I felt a lot throughout my life. Imposter, cultural outsider, Korean without the substance, a fraud, failure, guilt, sadness, cautious curiosity. If you know, you know. How do I not know what this food is? I can't decide if I'm more sad that I know nothing about something so seemingly basic, or the fact that my coworker, a hazel-eyed sorority girl from Georgia, knows. She knows. So that day, I decided I would be responsible for learning this. No one else is going to teach me. I don't have the luxury of generations of strong Korean maternal figures to teach me how to cook traditional recipes or pass along the basics, let alone secrets to cooking the food of my birth country. I've always imagined scenes like the Joy Luck Club or Crazy Rich Asians, where I disappoint a strict Asian matriarch while attempting to cook an old family recipe. But no, I have Jackie, my mom, Jacqueline Louise Gross. My mom comes from the land of casseroles. You know, the one dish meal with base ingredients like cream of chicken or mushroom soup, Velveeta cheese, ground beef, and macaroni noodles. If she really wants to spice things up, she'd throw in a diced green pepper. She always cooked veggies into submission. No, it wasn't always the prettiest and definitely not the fanciest food, but it was the food of my childhood. It nourished us, filled our home with comforting smells, and it was always prepared with love and care. It's from her that I learned how a home-cooked meal can bring people together, and I learned to love the ritual of cooking for people you love. But there was no spice, no funk, no acid. She always stuck to the recipe. No room for improvising, and I always felt like something was missing. I recently heard that your gut is the same makeup as your birth mother's. Makes sense. You ate what she ate. You relied on her body for nourishment. We were connected. I will never meet this woman, but I've always wondered, is my love of spicy and acidic food our shared connection? Is it something that she passed on to me? Is this my inheritance, the bond that lives with me? I don't know if it's true, but it's something that makes me feel good and brings comfort to my heart. Now back to that casual weekday lunch. Who knew it would be the catalyst to me taking my first very small but intentional steps toward exploring my Korean culture. I wanted to taste these new flavors again, chase them down, seek them out, rediscover them, try and replicate them at home. At home, this felt safe. I could experiment and try things by myself, learn the dishes and ingredients without the all too familiar fear of embarrassment and shame of not being Korean enough. Esther Choi, David Chang, Peter Serpico, and YouTube would become my teachers. So off I went to H Mart with one of my best friends to buy ingredients for my new Learning Korean cookbook. I only have olive oil. I need to buy sesame oil. I have spaghetti noodles, but I need glass noodles. I have a red onion, but I need tons of green onion. I have barbecue and hot sauce, but I need gochujang. I have knives, but apparently now I need kitchen shears. I got home and I started to cook. I started with something easy, a side dish. And I pickled my own fucking daikon. Repeat, I pickled my own daikon. Did I ruin a cutting board? Yes. Did I stain my hands yellow with turmeric? Yes. Was it delicious and something I've never tasted before? Yes. I've slowly been making my way through the cookbook. Beef bulgogi, crushed it. Seasoned mung beans, easy to make. Am I doing it perfectly? 100% no. But the food I'm making tastes good and it is mine. And guess what? I even made my own japchae. It wasn't the prettiest, but it did look like an awkward, distant relative of that food truck dish I had on that fateful afternoon. I'm still learning a lot as I navigate my adoption identity, and cooking at home may seem like a simplistic or trivial method to tackling this complex journey. But it's a familiar way for me to start to discover and connect to the parts of my heritage that I'm just getting to know. It has allowed me the space to experiment and make things my own. And now at least I won't be totally caught off guard in the lunch line. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Hi, my name is Wilder. My pronouns are he, him, his. And the title of my story is The Denial of It. My dad picked me out when I was 9 weeks old, allegedly 9 weeks old. When you're listed and sold as an abandoned baby and don't possess the written documentation confirming your first 3 weeks, it's fair to question the legitimacy of a date. So I am designer baby number 5139, Holt class circa July 1967. I was special ordered and delivered by a giant glistening silver stork named Pan Am Airlines. I was chosen, paid for. I like to think of myself as one of the original designer babies. I even have the receipt for $500. It covered transportation and processing. A little fun fact is that it cost $5 to replace my driver's license and $555 to replace a naturalization certificate. Growing up, there were two key components that I can recall that my parents used to help me feel connected to them. One, my alleged birthday is also on the same day as my dad's. And the other, my dad and I both have birthmarks on our sides, shaped in a heart, and our last name is Hart. Oh, it was meant to be. As a toddler, my mom would stand me in front of a mirror and then ask me to look very closely and carefully at myself. Then she would direct me to look very closely and carefully at her. Then she would ask the question, what's different? In an act of perfection and total success, I would eventually successfully spy a mole on her nose that did not exist on mine. But all good things must come to an end, as they say, and eventually I would understand that we were different and how I was different. That's when the story about being chosen gets challenged and replaced with a variety of reasons offered as to why I was given up in the first place. And we're all familiar with that range. Things that are ugly, ranging from an affair, a mother who might have been a sex worker, parents with active substance use disorder, parents that were poor, young, unmarried, or the secretly fantasized, switched at birth, but really come from royalty scene. My parents said, we were told we're an abandoned baby. Chosen? Abandoned baby? Did my life really matter? A question that becomes rhetorical over a lifetime. I grew up as an only child, and because my father was in the Air Force, we moved a fair amount. By the time I graduated from high school, I had attended 12 different schools. So a positive was that if I didn't like a school or location, I knew it was just a matter of time before it would change again. But multiple schools also meant surviving multiple awkward family tree projects. Moving around frequently reinforced how not to get too attached to others. I would have to field the same questions from different adults and children with each new move. Are you Chinese or Japanese? Why don't you look like your parents? Do you know your real parents? Is that your real name? Are you from North or South Korea? Pediatricians would ask if my curled toes were from my mother or father, and I would shake my head embarrassed and feel shame as the abandoned baby that did not know the answer. During childhood, I spent most of my time trying to be a good chameleon versus an ugly duckling. But it's an impossible feat for a transracial adoptee. It was much easier to despise those physical traits that separated me from everybody else. As an adult, strangers with poor boundaries will walk up to me and ask me where I'm from. I'll say Maine, and they'll say, no, really, where are you really from? Or they'll tell me they fought for my people in the Vietnam War, or begin speaking to me in Korean. And in the past, when I presented as female, even propositioned me for sex. Being asked for family history by strangers in medical offices, both in written form and then again in person, minutes later, even though the question had already been answered. When I stare at my body parts, then and now, I wonder still, whose eyes, hands, smile, and temperament I have. As a cat, I continue to search every new space I enter for common physical characteristics in others, only to rarely find success. We can ignore it all we want, but our history eventually always comes back to haunt us. Meredith, Grey's Anatomy. Denial is an acronym for don't even know I'm lying. I teach this to those with addiction. Denial is often a red flag for those who don't even recognize they have a problem with substance use or when someone is moving back towards a relapse. I think I was in my 40s when I began to allow myself to say out loud that being adopted might be a little more significant to me than I realized. I did not want to appear disloyal to my adopted parents. I mean, I did bawl in the scene in the Joy Luck Club when the woman had to leave her twins on the roadside. However, my tears were protected by the darkness of the movie theater and drowned out by the sounds of so many others crying around me. Then, fast forward another 15 years to my naive DVD purchase of E.T., where I had seen the movie when I was 16, but had forgotten about the opening scene. I was immediately propelled into an emotional convulsion as I watched E.T. panicked and horrified when his spaceship and family accidentally left him behind. And I cried deeply, sorrowful, and knowing. My emotional management skills at that time were self-taught. What the hell's wrong with you? This is a fiction movie. Hello, quit being a baby. The realization becomes even greater as to how expansive the impact of adoption is and the size of the what I don't know about myself file. Stuff others take for granted. Time and location of birth, weight, length, pictures, stories about your conception, time in the womb or your delivery, and then any and all biological family stories. The infancy is a time that we can't recall. We rely on others to tell our stories. But all my witnesses for those first 9 months are MIA. You know, a lot can happen in 9 months. Like, we can grow a new human in that time frame. An important fact I discovered about myself is that I'm transgender. Only took 50 years. It was one of those holy macro moments with myself. But I blame lack of educated conversations about gender for why it took so long. Like systemic racism, it isn't talked about, and people are not educated. Gender is still greatly misunderstood by many, especially us older folk. However, understanding that gender is on a spectrum, it's not a new social media thing. The ancient Hebrews recognized 5 different genders. Gender became believed to be binary in large part thanks to Hitler. What a great guy he turned out to be. When you're trans, there are expensive steps and challenges to have to conquer. Things like changing name, gender on a birth certificate or driver's license, marriage certificate, medical record, with an employer, banks, or even on a naturalization certificate. To date, I have yet to conquer all those hurdles, which will allow me to travel outside of the US as my authentic self. But someday, I hope to travel back to Korea to allow my heart to reconnect to my birth country at least one more time. I hope that the larger society will someday be safe enough for people like me to live our authentic selves. But until it does, I hope that by speaking my truth out loud, it will help other individuals like me to know that they're not alone. After writing this story, I learned this morning of a trans woman in Pennsylvania, a Korean adoptee, killed by police in May while running back into her home during a mental health crisis, leaving behind a wife, 2 young children, and a CAD sibling she was very close to. She was 47. She was one of us. Rest in peace, Maddie Hoffman. I'm so sorry it was not safe for you. Your life did matter. In just the past 4 years, the number of trans homicides have increased by 93%, with transgender women of color being disproportionately represented. Being chosen and an abandoned baby means managing grief over losses that have deeply scarred my heart regarding memories I cannot recall. They are and may be unexpectedly triggered through various senses. The results, intense, raw feelings outside of my control. And whether I'm participating in a project like this or answering what appears to be a benign question about adoption, there's a tremendous emotional price that I must make space for. The ambiguous loss of my family and country. I'm not in denial anymore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wilder.
Hi, my name is Tracy Hobson. My pronouns are she and her, and my piece is entitled Identity Interrupted. My children and I have perfected the 30-second elevator talk to stay connected. So when my son pushed a vial in my face and said, "just spit," it never dawned on me that it would catapult me onto that proverbial yellow brick road of truth. My truth, to be more specific. It's no secret that I'm adopted, and that wasn't the big reveal that came 4 weeks after slobbering into that little glass capsule. Pretty boring statistics, but oddly, I felt relief. Actually, it was more of a sense of triumph when I first read that small piece of empirical data that sealed and protected my first and foremost label of truth. I am more Korean than anything else, 51% to be exact. But the second truth crushed the euphoria of the first, and self-doubt began to whisper, "Is no one looking for you? Are you not worth searching for?" In essence, I am still not whole. And the light within me is not shining magnificently. And one thing became painfully clear. The attachments of labels will be intrinsic to my journey. For example, first generation adoptee, first, a word that should invoke pride and enthusiasm, but by adding generation and adoptee, the context of first becomes a burden. It is in actuality a fact, one that will not go away, nor can it be spruced up into something elegant or envied. And since we're talking facts, the true label should be first generation biracial adoptee. When I returned to Korea in 2021 for the first time after leaving in 1961, my itinerary included a conversation with a first generation adoptee expert. While preparing for the meeting, I was pretty shocked to find out that this so-called expert is not an adoptee. Instant resentment. How dare she turn the painful journey of Korean adoptees into a social construct under the guise of academia? And that day, facing each other across the table, there was the usual exchange of pleasantries. Her eyes, however, said, "I know you doubt me, but please trust me just this once." She clearly had been briefed on my backstory because she, at the ready, were pictures, archived news articles, old government propaganda flyers, and even transcripts of interviews with first generation mothers. Women who had told terrific stories about giving up their babies under the suffocating cloak of a Korean government that was burdened by idealistic but unrealistic beliefs and biases. Then came the coup de grace. The statistics, not just of children by gender and ethnicity that were orphaned in Korea, but the number of orphans who were adopted each year, starting with the ceasefire of the Korean War. As I honed into the year of my birth and my adoption year, the numbers coming off that page turned into ghostly faces that mocked me incessantly. The labels of that X and Y axis on that tiny matrix had suddenly reduced me to a pity statistic. I was well aware of the rumors that biracial adoptees, the children of foreign soldiers and Korean mothers, were considered impure, lepers to the chastity of all that was Korean. And staring at the numbers, that hard, cold truth slapped me so hard, I found myself gasping for air. I had been abandoned twice within the first 5 years of my life, not only by my flesh and blood, but by my birth country. And the best way to describe that feeling, it was cheese. Everyone loves cheese, and that is until the mold that is inherent in it becomes visible. Then it becomes inedible, sickening in fact, and the only thing left to do is to toss it quickly to quell the stench. It's funny how a simple label can trigger emotions waffling somewhere between self and hate and genuine curiosity. I often forget, but I do acknowledge that I have the right to categorically and unapologetically deny any label that I don't like or does not serve me, all except for one. Moon Mihei. The name that appears on my green card and the label I spent more than 5 decades hiding, keeping it neatly tucked in the back of my mind's junk drawer. My adoptive father always stuck to the story that Mihei translated into something like beautiful joy. So if I was beautiful joy, then why were my parents so quick to change it? Am I not beautiful? Do I not bring joy? Does that mean I should brace myself to be rejected and abandoned for yet a third time? With these heavy thoughts of self-doubt, how could I possibly be proud of a name that was tossed out just like that moldy cheese? I can't remember exactly when I began to understand the power of those 3 simple syllables had over my psyche. 3 simple syllables that would get caught in my throat like a fishbone every time I tried to say them out loud. Maybe it was the first time I tried to articulate the struggle of being adopted in an elementary school essay entitled, ironically enough, The Me Nobody Knows. Or maybe it was the annual task of reporting to immigration because I was still on green card status. That meek process triggered so much anxiety and emotional turmoil that I could have easily been the poster child for psychological case study. Or maybe it was while applying for US naturalization, I discovered not a single document existed that proved my legal name was Tracy. It was an alias, a random label that conjured up the realization that I was, in fact, the me that nobody knows. And it was that contemplative struggle that made me determined to be thoughtful and deliberate when naming my children. I wanted their labels to truly embody the spirit that emanated from them at birth. Subconsciously, I wanted them to be proud of their names, unlike me, who struggled with and was tortured by mine. Tiffany Ian was a manifestation of God's grace. I placed the eternal crown on the head of Tajay Armand, who would achieve his dreams calmly with certainty. And my fairy princess, Tatiana Gabrielle, was God's messenger who would emanate light and love to not just my heart, but to the world. I was so used to being in harmony with the trauma my name brought up for me that when I went to Seoul and was introduced as Moon Mihei for the first time, I was very confused by the butterflies in my stomach and surprised by the split-second euphoria at hearing the melodic sound of my name. Those same butterflies, though, multiplied exponentially and fluttered crazily when I had to sign documentation for the recovery of my current Korean citizenship. As I stared at the contrast of the beautiful flow of the Hangul characters for Moon Mihei to the superficially connected English letters of Tracy Hobson, those chaotic butterflies began to settle quietly, resting peacefully on a resilient, beautiful, and noble magnolia. Then the aha moment. Just as I had meticulously named my children, someone also, with great purpose and intention, bestowed a name on me. Maybe, just maybe, I was a beautiful joy, at least to one person. For the first time, I didn't want to hide from the label Moon Mihei anymore. It wasn't threatening, nor was it intimidating. It was becoming a tiny light in the abyss of my adoption trauma. But when the consulate explained that my children's name would appear in my Korean registry, I was suddenly terrified by the thought that my legacy would somehow be tainted because of the English labels I had given them. All I could think of was, please God, I won't shame my ancestors. In panic, I reached out to a poet in Seoul to help me eternalize my legacy by bestowing a Korean name on my children, but not just a random moniker. It had to be beautiful, melodic, strong, that not only spoke to who they were in their soul, but in my heart as their mother. Tiffany, the manifestation of God's grace, is Haesung, translated ocean bright, because God's biggest miracles come when the sun rises after the darkness of night. That sun over the ocean can make the smallest ray of light the brightest. Tajay, my crown, being an achiever of dreams, became Junsa. Translated, hero with slow patience. And through that slow patient and consistent hard work and strong mindset, he will build his stature of greatness. And finally, Tatiana, my fairy messenger of God, is Yuna. Translated, shine, bright, grasp and control. For she not only brings, but leaves and manifests brilliant light and sincere love everywhere her presence is felt, seen, heard. So when you ask this Korean adoptee on a journey of self-discovery and cultural affirmation, what's in a name, a label? This soul, and yes, the pun is definitely intended, will answer more than one could possibly imagine, more than one could conceivably fathom, more than one would ever understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I just want to give such a heartfelt thank you to all of the storytellers tonight. I am just blown away by your finished piece. Just seeing all of the evolution week to week, and also just the camaraderie that you formed and your support for one another. It's so beautiful, and it's been such a humbling experience. And thank you to our audience members. If you have any positive feedback that you would like to share with any of tonight's storytellers, please send that feedback to my personal email, ShanaeRandall@gmail.com, and I will make sure that your notes and comments get to the correct people. I would like to give a huge thank you to BKA and Kathy and Sarah, and especially to Bob, our interpreter. Thank you so much for making these stories accessible to everybody. And Kathy, I know you have a few closing remarks.
Thanks, Shanae. Wow. Yeah, I just, all of your stories are so different, and yet they all resonated with me in very specific ways. And so I hope with others as well. There was a sort of freedom I felt as I was listening and reacting to your stories from being an adoptee among an adoptee audience, which is such a unique experience. So thank you for this opportunity. And again, congratulations to all the storytellers tonight. And Shanae, thank you so much for facilitating the storytelling workshop and tonight's showcase. Huge thanks to Bob, our lone ASL interpreter tonight. We are so grateful for you. And thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us tonight. Just a quick reminder, I will post in the chat, but this event is made possible by funding from the National Center for the Rights of the Child, and NCRC is collecting responses for a survey about how this program went. So we'd be so grateful if you could please share your thoughts with them in the survey, if you are willing and able. So thank you again.